Shabbat Shalom, great men of Yahweh. As we enter in here to the great Sabbath day, we're going to be picking up this evening in the 8th book of Yisrayl, part 2. The 8th book of Yisrayl, part 2, which is persecuted but not forsaken. And we're going to be picking up in chapter 3 of the 8th book of Yisrayl, part 2. If you have the book that you're following along on, it's going to be on page 26. And if you're following along in the Yisrayl Says, it's going to be chapter 3 of the 8th book of Yisrayl. Now, this sermon Pastor gave a few moons ago. It was back on 7/19/2008, almost a little over 12 years ago now. And he entitled this sermon, Yahweh is the Only Power, Number 1. 3 works going on at this time. The quartet pushing democracy, the religious little horn conquering and to conquer, and the House of Yahweh bringing the only way of peace. So he's going to show these 3 different works taking place in the world today and what we see taking place among the nations, and show the difference between what Malachi Martin wrote in the book The Keys of This Blood about how there's a 3-way struggle taking place among the nations of the world. Pastor's showing here this 3-way struggle amongst the minds of the people and the belief and the inspiration of the people. And so we start off here. He says, Shalom, everyone. Praise Yahweh. You can be seated. Praise Yahweh. The peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. I'm seeing some great things in the news now, and depending on whether you understand it or not, I guess will be dependent on how much you've understood and put together in the past. So as pastor, when he watches the news and they bring forth the news here to us in the great house of Yahweh, he's trying to get us to see these great things that are understood by what's been brought, or how much that we understand of what's been brought. So at times if we find ourselves not understanding the importance of these news stories and articles, we should be going back and reviewing and rehearsing these sermons pastors given, going back and reading the literature, the Mark of the Beast, volume 1 and 2, to see the prophetic roles taking place right before our very eyes, and how we can see mankind coming to this point that Yahweh prophesied thousands of years ago, and that he sent his servant Israel to teach 30, 40 years ago, put it in writing of what would take place here amongst man's governments. So these things are exciting, these great things in the news, and seeing and understand these things brings this joy to your mind. In verse 4 he says, now this article here it says, Vatican backs talks on Iran nuclear case. And this is interesting, showing here, how the Vatican is actually backing, they say right here, the Vatican respects Iran's right to peaceful nuclear technology. So the Vatican is actually bolstering up this desire that Iran is having. And this shows a lot to what we see even to this time period. This was 12 years ago, and I don't know if you remember, but these news articles 12 years ago in this time period, and in the late 2008, going into from 2006 to 2008, there was a lot of tension between the Iranian government and the Western world based on their nuclear program. And then the Vatican actually says they respect Iran's right to peaceful nuclear technology. And it actually showed how the Vatican was trying to bolster relations between Iran and other countries. And from that influence of the Vatican, led into the talks that they had, from 2010 to, or around 2010 to 2014-15, where they had the six-party talks between the Iranians and the Western powers trying to come to an agreement, and they came up with the Iranian deal, which has been since revoked by the United States, but the other 5 countries are still trying to adhere to it. But it just shows here the power that this city that sits on 7 hills, it shows the power they have over these nations, and how when they support something, it gets people to working and to moving and action to taking place. And you didn't see, as it was assumed that President George W. Bush was going to go into Iran, and he was going to topple the government, he was going to bring democracy there, but those things didn't transpire as they looked to be, And some of this was the play of the Vatican here in trying to push a different agenda here, and I would tend to think, that a lot of Iran's strength and the power that they're still able to say some of the things they say and do some of the things they do is because they still do have a decent standing with the Vatican so far. They must be paying their tribute, Oil produces a lot of money, and money is what brings forth this power and this control, this spreading of this system. Now, going on here to page 27 and verse 11, Pastor says, I was handed some news articles this morning, and they said they're watching every move you're making, the Catholics are, and they're bringing some of these things out. And of course, the people that are watching the news and listening to the sermons of the House of Yahweh, they're beginning to understand what's going on. I want you to understand fully. I want them to, but before the sermon is over, if you pay really close attention, you will. So you can see here that the Catholic Church, yes, is paying attention to what Pastor is bringing forth, the House of Yahweh is bringing forth, and so are those that are following Catholicism, those that call themselves Catholic, that why we're raised up this way or have this belief system. And look what Pastor says here. And of course, the people that are watching the news and listening to the sermons of the House of Yahweh, they're beginning to understand what's going on. And this week they had an article, or several articles that came out showing how the Pope made statements. It was last year he made these statements, but they're just coming to light, endorsing this immorality. And it's really causing people to have some thoughts on this belief that they have in following what the Catholic Church is teaching. And those that have been watching the sermons, watching the news, and listening to the sermons the House of Yahweh are bringing forth, they're starting to see what's taking place. They're starting to see this religious system, this sodomatic religious system, spreading forth this immorality and this evil. And Pastor says here in verse 12, be turning over to Isaiah 45, because that's where the work of Yahweh started, of course. And we see three works together here. Now, we don't see Russia being really a third contender for this. We see the House of Yahweh. We see the three contenders are the House of Yahweh, the Catholic Church, and, of course, the United States. Okay, so this is the three contenders here of these works taking place, is the House of Yahweh, the Catholic Church, and the United States. And then look what he says here at the top of the page 27, the right-hand column. He says, but the United States and the Catholic Church have joined. They've joined to fight. And they don't realize it, but they're fighting against Yahweh. Okay, so you can see, when you see things coming from the United States, when you see things coming from the Catholic Church, this is a joined system. Okay, this second beast has joined with the first beast to fight. They don't realize it, but it's to fight against Yahweh. This is what their fight is against. So the different propaganda that comes forth. Remember, the Catholic Church is the leader of propaganda. They are the ones that push forward the different propaganda through the news media and the various outlets. The different propaganda will get people thinking in different ways and thinking there's possibly differences in countries or systems or setups. But you can see here that it's these two, the United States and the Catholic Church, that have joined to fight against Yahweh, because the House of Yahweh is teaching against this system. It's teaching against this wicked, sin-filled system that is bringing the results that we see today, where mankind is suffering and they're having a hard time experiencing the joy that should come through keeping Yahweh's laws. But because they break Yahweh's laws, they don't get to experience that joy. They're just experiencing these consequences that are taking place. Okay. In verse 14, he says, and then I know that they will be giving glory to Yahweh throughout this time period by their actions. Okay, and he's talking here about the quartet. He goes in here to about the quartet. Give me just a second. I'll be right back here. Apologize about that. Okay, in verse 14, he says, and then I know they will be giving glory to Yahweh throughout this time period by their actions. Okay, he's speaking about the quartet and those government leaders of the quartet whose lives are spared from this destruction that's coming upon mankind. He says, I know that they will be giving glory to Yahweh throughout this time period by their actions, because what they're doing, they're not even knowing this, they're fulfilling Yahweh's will. Because Yahweh intends to show what will take place when He allows this, when He allows Satan's plans to be carried out. Okay, so the quartet, by going under the inspiration that they're being led by Satan, by bringing about this war-raging system, forcing people into this control and trying to force them into these different stances that they're bringing upon mankind from, one end of the globe to the other end of the globe. This is engulfed all the nations. These things is a part of allowing Yahweh's will to be fulfilled, because Yahweh intends to show what will take place when He allows Satan's plans to be carried out. Okay, Satan has plans that are going against Yahweh's plan, but Yahweh's plan is to allow Satan's plans to be carried out to prove, remember what Yahweh's allowing, for heaven and earth to see that sin can and will never bring peace. Okay, so Yahweh allows these plans to be carried out. Now, He shows in verse 15 here, now prophecy. Only Yahweh can foretell prophecy. You cannot find it in any of the books of the gods anywhere where they can actually foretell prophecy. They've never been able to. If they could, they would be bragging about it, boasting about it, and they would be telling their people what was going to take place. They probably wouldn't tell them what was going to take place because they wouldn't know it, but they wouldn't want them to know if they knew they were going to be destroyed. Okay, showing, so the gods, they have no understanding of prophecy. They don't understand Yahweh's plan and where it comes concerning the prophecies according to the laws and the prophets. Okay, they've been blinded from seeing these things because they don't follow Yahweh's teachings. They don't read the book of Yahweh. They don't study the scriptures. They have no books to show anywhere the fulfillment, the foretelling of prophecy. Now going on here to verse 18, and this is in the 8th book of Yisrayl, part 2, chapter 3, and we're going to start picking up here in verse 18. He says, and all the world is going to Satan. All the world. There's not an exemption. There's not, except this group and that group. No, all the world is going to Satan. You remember what Pastor brought on Sabbath? Because when the daughters, they call them the daughters of the Catholic Church, when these other religions go in a different way, but they follow the same teachings of the Catholic Church, they fall into being the daughters of this great whore, this beastly system. But all the world is going to Satan. All the world is worshiping Satan at this time. They don't realize it. They don't realize it, That's how strong deception is. It's something that is not evident to a person sitting right in front of them. Many in the world today, many are trying to do what they seem right is in their own eyes, or what they've been taught by their religious leaders, or what their parents or grandparents taught them. They're trying to do what they feel is right, but they don't realize that they're worshiping Satan. They haven't had this understanding yet that we are blessed. We, the great saints of Yahweh here, have this blessing of having this veil of deception lifted from before our eyes. We're able to realize that going against Yahweh's laws is the worship of Satan. You don't have to set up a Mary statue in your living room and bow down and say your Hail Marys and all your other, prayers that they have. No, you just stop keeping Yahweh's Sabbath, as Pastor's been showing. You stop keeping Yahweh's Sabbath. You stop showing up for your appointments. You take this mark of Yahweh away from you by not following the instructions Yahweh's given. But the world doesn't realize this. But they are. They're worshiping Satan. They're playing right into her hands. And most of the world doesn't even realize that. They don't even realize that Satan is this woman that's deceiving them, in her hatred against Yahweh and against His sons that He's prophesied that are going to take these eternal positions. And of course, Moshe said, she's the power that's trying to bring mankind down. Remember, that's in Moshe 3 verse 11. If we have time, we'll read that here shortly. But she is the power that's trying to bring mankind down. It's so strange that they're working. She's got them so deceived that they're actually working to destroy mankind completely. And of course, that's Satan's plan to destroy mankind completely. And you see this in the nations today where they realize that they have such an enormous amount of weapons that they could destroy the earth, so many times over. It's just impractical what they have. It's not like they have something to supposedly protect them. They have an enormous amount of weapons that could destroy the earth so many times over. It's unreal. And you hear some world leaders in interviews and news stories where they'll actually, say this is crazy. Where we're headed is absolutely crazy. They can see the inevitability of using these weapons, and they don't understand prophecy. They can just see the anger among the nations. But Yahweh's prophesied that these people who are led by Satan, they will use these things trying to destroy mankind under Satan's inspiration. And they can't see that. They're so deceived, they can't even realize she's trying to work to destroy mankind completely. And this is a part of her plan, to wipe out mankind, because she doesn't want what? She doesn't want mankind to take these positions of as being Yahweh's sons and daughters in this eternal kingdom that's coming. Now, pastors, if you look at Moshe 3 and verse 7, we're going to kind of be skipping through here from verses 22 to 25, reading in Moshe 3 verse 7, he says, "Most assuredly, Father Yahweh will have no work other than the work that he has prophesied in advance by his servants, the prophets." So how will you know it's Yahweh's work? It'll be prophesied in advance. In verse 8, "The lion has roared, who will not fear? Father Yahweh has spoken, but who can prophesy?" Moshe 3:9, "Publish in the palaces of Ashdod and in the palaces of the land of Egypt, and say, assemble yourselves on the mountains." This is the uplifted places, Pastor says, "and of Samaria, the people with the mark, and behold." Take notice of what's going on here. Take notice. And then Pastor says in verse 25, only Yahweh has the power and knowledge to teach righteous behavior that will bring peace. The gods don't have this knowledge. They're a bunch of fools, Yahweh said, ever searching, but never able to come to the knowledge of the truth that would bring them peace. Now that's something you can see. That's something you can see today as Pastor started off here. You're seeing some great things in the news now. That's something you can see right there. The gods, they're a bunch of fools, Yahweh said, ever searching, but never able to come to the knowledge of the truth that would bring them peace. There are some of the great things you can see in the news today. Day by day, you see all this hatred, this anger, this foolishness that's taken place where there's no solutions to their problems. Only accusations and investigations and all these different amounts of things. Why? Pastor said it right here in the start of verse 25. Only Yahweh has the power and knowledge to teach righteous behavior that will bring peace. And this is very important, very vital for us men to realize what we're being offered here in these last days at the House of Yahweh. What Pastor is actually bringing us here through this administration of the House of Yahweh. He's bringing us this power and this knowledge, teaching us this righteous behavior that's going to bring peace. Peace in our own lives, peace in our neighbors' lives as we interact with them, peace to the universe, to the microorganisms, to all of Yahweh's creation. And only Yahweh has this power and knowledge to teach righteous behavior. And I can speak for myself in saying that, a lot of times when we're instructed in knowledge and we're taught here at the House of Yahweh, it's not like Pastor, he'll say, okay, now everyone, now listen up. All right, pay attention. I want you all to pay attention. Now, he says that, but he doesn't say it on like a continual basis of, all right, I'm going to give you some power and knowledge. It's going to teach you righteous behavior. All right, you listening? Listen closely. No, it's line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little and there a little. He brings these teachings to us, teaching us the power and knowledge that comes from Yahweh that's going to bring this righteous behavior that will bring peace. And this is how vitally important it is to listen to and to obey Yahweh's anointed, appointed servant in these last days. To really listen and obey and to hear, to humble ourselves, to get past the carnal thinking, the carnal thinking, the things that are stuck in our mind, and we're going to go into this here next, the things that we've come up with where we're in total opposition against Yahweh when we go on our own thoughts, our own understanding, how we feel about something. Let Yahweh guide and direct us through His house, through His servant Israel Hawkins, in receiving this power and knowledge to teach righteous behavior that will bring peace. Because speaking for myself, I've watched and sat and watched and listened to Pastor, and sometimes when he says something at first, it doesn't totally make sense in the mind. At first you're like, well, I don't know how that's going to work. You could have some kind of a difficulty where, you and your neighbor are having some daily difficulty, and Pastor gives some simple wisdom, and you'd be like, I don't know how that's going to work. I thought he was going to say this or he was going to say that. But he brings forth the knowledge and the power that teaches this righteous behavior. We have to be humble and obedient, always, begging Yahweh for that humble obedience to be able to listen to and to obey these words that He's teaching us so we can receive this power and this knowledge. Because if we buck up against it, if we allow pride to rise up, if we go on our own thoughts, our own thinking, we'll be in total opposition to Yahweh's power and knowledge that's teaching this righteous behavior. And then we're going to have this power and knowledge, or we won't be able to have the great jobs that Yahweh is offering to mankind at this time. We won't be able to receive those jobs, So continue to beg Yahweh to help humble our minds, humble our thoughts, allow us to absorb the knowledge and the power that's coming forth from Him through His house, through the one He sent, and when there's a message that comes forth from the house of Yahweh, that message is coming under the inspiration of the one Yahweh sent. So whoever pastor, when he sends the priest or the young priest, or he sends the sisters up here, when teaching and guidance comes forth from the house of Yahweh, this is this power and knowledge that only can come from Yahweh. Don't allow your mind to be closed off to this. Because look right here what we see in verse 31. In verse 31 he says, the evil that is going on in the world today, I think Yahweh can't even stand to look at it right now. I think it's worse, much worse than it was in the days of Noah, because there's more of it. It's just like it was, that is, the man's attitude, mankind's attitude. And look at mankind's attitude. Man is confused. Yahweh shows because he's broken His laws. He's got a confused mind, full of violence, hatred, and sadistic behavior, to where it seems like there's love for torturing or hurting someone else. And you can see how mankind, looks at this, deceived mankind looks at this as being strength. This is strength and might, where you can hurt somebody, where you can bear hatred, say evil words about them, look to torture or to hurt them. Look what Pastor shows here, that this is the confusion of man's mind. The attitude, man's attitude, because he broke Yahweh's laws, he's got a confused mind full of violence. In verse 34, he says, well, that's what we see in the world today, but there's much more of it, brethren, than you would ever imagine. I know it's hard for you because you've been cleansed, you've been sanctified, and so forth, so it's hard for you to really imagine wanting to hurt somebody else. You should be that way anyway. I hope you are. So we the sons of Yahweh, we shouldn't have this kind of mindset that we see in man's attitude today, in the world, and those that have the mark of the beast with this violence, hatred, and sadistic behavior, this desire to hurt. As pastors have been showing us that, our blood should be able to testify to the fact, we should be able to be seen by the microbes, by the little tiny kingdoms that make up everything that's around us, everything we see, we smell, we taste. We should be able to prove to them that we would never, ever cause hurt or hatred. And this is what Pastor's trying to show us. This starts in our own thinking. We're dealing with, that guy that we don't like to deal with, or this individual, or we don't want to follow that instruction. This is how important it is, for us to continue. Yes, the physical cleansing, the pastor said here, I know it's hard for you to imagine what this world's come to because you've been cleansed. Okay, physical cleansing of our bodies, but also, this mental cleansing of getting rid of these abominable teachings that come forth from this system. Now we're going to have to breeze through here. we're going to go over here to verse 60 on page 31 and verse 60. And as always, I encourage you to rehearse these sermons that we're going over in classes, because we can only hit certain points of them in a few minutes here. But, rehearse these things or listen to them throughout the week, to help bring this line upon line and precept upon precept into all the things that are coming out here in these last days, in this time period. Because these things given 12 years ago are very important for our understanding. Well, in verse 60, he says, well, who can prophesy and tell you what's going to take place, Yahweh said. He says, none of them. None of the gods can do this. But Yahweh can inspire a person to do this, or people to do this. He can actually inspire it and prophesy that these people will do this, and even name them years, thousands of years in advance, and tell you what their names will be. And then he'll tell you what they're going to do in their lives, little details that are going to be done in their lives. This is power, my friend. You can't find intelligence like that in the gods. Praise Yahweh. Okay, you can see only Yahweh can inspire a person to tell what's going to take place. This is an inspiration that comes from Yahweh. Okay, these gods have no power to do this. And in verse 65, he shows no gods, no Elohim. You call on the Elohims, you call on gods, they're worthless. They have no power. They can't tell you what's going to take place in your life tomorrow, let alone 1,000 years from now. Okay, continuing on here in verse 73, and he's reading Isaiah 45 and verse 21, speak out, bring your proofs near. Yes, let them take counsel together. Who has declared this from ancient time? Who has foretold it from that time? And just quickly here, I'm going to jump up here to verse 73. He says, you could pray to the image of the grave where they put somebody in years ago, and your head would still be as empty as when it came before the grave. You wouldn't gain any knowledge there. People do this all the time, praying to the dead, worshiping the dead. They're about to have a whole festival about this. There is no knowledge to be gotten from these gods. Then in verse 74, do you know that no one has ever been able to prove Genesis wrong? The Catholics try to make out like they have, but they have not. They lie about these things. They lie and deceive to try to keep you from believing the Holy Scriptures. And the ones that say there's controversy, they don't even understand what they're reading in Genesis. If they understood what they were reading, they would know there's no contradiction in any of these chapters there. And in closing, men, just for your notes, I wanted to read to you Proverbs chapter 9 and verse 10 through 12, where it says, the reverence of Yahweh is the beginning, first requirement, chief part of wisdom. And the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. For by it your days will be multiplied, and years of life will be added to you. If you become wise, your wisdom will reward you. But if you scorn it, you alone will pay the penalty. And men, I continue to encourage, let's please all become wise by humbling ourselves before the one Yahweh is inspired to reveal these prophecies that he's written thousands of years ago. And at this time, if you all stand, I now have the privilege and honor to introduce to you the great Kohan Zephaniah Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. The peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you, the peace that can only come from the great house of Yahweh. We're going to continue where the great Kohan left off, and this particular sermon is again, we're in the 8th book of Israel. If those of you who are joining us, the 8th book of Israel, this is part 2, Persecuted but Not Forsaken. And the title of this, we're on chapter 3. This is dated 7/18/2008. And chapter 3 is actually going to start a series of sermons that the overseer gave called Yahweh is the Only Power. Okay, Yahweh is the only power, and this is number 1. Now, when you think of that word power, we can think of ability, and we'll look at some of those examples, from the scripture that the ability that Yahweh has, and one of those abilities is the being able to predict future events. Yahweh said that I can do this. I can prophesy, and He gives that ability or that authority to His last days witness, the great Yisrayl Hawkins, who brings, the scripture says, he will foretell them. But also the ability, also the knowledge. That power is knowledge, as we learn, having the great wisdom that will bring about peace. It can bring this peace between neighbors, as was covered in the first half, and the joy and just the peace of mind that mankind right now is searching for, but they can't find because they're not keeping Yahweh's laws. So keep that in mind when you think of Yahweh as the only power. Okay, and this is number one. 3 works going at this time. 3 works going at this time. The quartet pushing democracy, the religious little horn conquering and to conquer, which is found in Revelation chapter 6, and the house of Yahweh bringing the only way to peace. Okay, so we're going to pick up on page 32 and verse 75, 32 and verse 75. Have not I, Yahweh, and there is no source of power. Now, this is the conclusion of Isaiah 45, verse 21. And let's go back and read that. It says, Speak out, bring your proofs near. Yes, let them take counsel together. Who has declared this from ancient times? Who has foretold it from that time? Have not I, Yahweh? And there is no source of power. So that's one place where Yahweh says that he can predict the future. He has that ability to prophesy. If you would like to write down Isaiah 42 verse 9, because there's a few places here that show that Yahweh has this power, this ability. Isaiah 42 verse 9 says, Behold, the former things have come to pass, and new things I do declare before they spring forth. I tell you of them. So, before they spring forth. Now, anyone could say, well, I already knew that, and, I saw that coming. But Yahweh does it before they take place to show that he has this ability. He has this power to predict future events. He has this ability to prophesy. And also Isaiah 46, verse 10. Isaiah 46, verse 10, if you want to write these down. Declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times those things which are not yet done, saying, My counsel will stand, and I will fulfill all my plan. And if you think of the wisdom and power in just that verse there, that Yahweh says, My counsel is going to stand. Everything that's written is going to come to pass. My plan, exactly according to my plan. The gods have no plan. They have no writings. Their writings, they can't predict the future. But Yahweh can. And this is what sets Yahweh far above the gods. Okay? Yahweh is the only source of power. And this is what he says. This is what the prophet Isaiah was telling us. And, one thing to remember is that he gives this power, he can give this authority to someone. He gives it specifically to his last day's work, the great house of Yahweh in the last days, specifically the last witness. Okay? One of the 2 witnesses. And we find this in Isaiah 44, verse 7. And who is I will foretell, and set it in order for me, since I appointed the ancient people, and the things which are coming and will come, let them, the 2 witnesses, or the last witness who becomes the spokesman for both of them, let them foretell them. Okay, speaking of, let them prophesy of these events. Let them preach to the world so that the whole world can see that Yahweh, the source of power, is with that man. That's what Yahweh is saying. Okay, because the world is going to see, they're going to look and they're going to see the wisdom that this man had the entire time. They're starting to see it now, but they're going to see it more so with these events that are coming to pass. Okay, so let's continue in verse 75. Well, what do the gods say? How do the gods say that you came to earth? Where is their book that they have written telling us how we got here? Of course, they have nothing. And what about the plan that is for you that is being carried out? They have no power. They have no knowledge. Okay, so there you see the power. The power is knowledge, having this wisdom. So they have no knowledge to even write these books to tell you such things. Yahweh inspired these books in everything. Every prophecy that has been fulfilled proves that they are true. That what Yahweh has written is true. Yes, praise Yahweh. There is no source of power that can foretell this except Yahweh. And one of the things that Yahweh shows in talking about this power is Matthew chapter 24, because there's coming a time, we're in this time period that is like no other. There can't be two of the worst times of trouble ever. There's only one, and we're in this great tribulation. It's these last days here, in the very last part of it. Well, Matthew chapter 24, verses 21 through 22, and this shows some of Yahweh's power. For then will be great tribulation, such as has not come to pass since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever will be. It will never be again. We'll never have such a great tribulation. And unless those days were shortened, there would no flesh be saved. Well, some power has to shorten those days. Someone who has this tremendous ability has to stop that the way the world is moving as a result of sin, because otherwise the earth would become another one of these dry, dusty planets that we see floating around right now that have no life on them, as we're learning, because they went this way. The beings that were on there, they went that way, and that's what it came to, where no life existed. So, but Yahweh has the power. He's going to step in and stop it. And this is why. He says, for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. So Yahweh has this power, and he's going to show it to us here in this very last part here, this final showdown. Okay, so let's continue. Let's look at verse 85. If you look at page 33, verse 85. Well, one of these works here, now remember, there's 7 works shown, okay, 7 works of Yahweh. One of these works here is connected with the Great Tribulation, okay? There's only one work going right now that's connected with the Great Tribulation, the greatest time period in the greatest tribulation, where mankind, the choices that they've made it's all being brought down to right now, to where we see the 7 plagues coming upon this earth, the first one being this coronavirus, and getting ready or starting to see the signs of the second one, the pollutions of the dying off of the life in the oceans, the seas, and so forth. Okay, that's starting to come about as well. So it's all coming down to this last part here of the last days and what's called the Great Tribulation. So one of these works here is connected with the Great Tribulation. Only one of them is connected with the Great Tribulation, and that's found in verse 7. Now, he's in Revelation chapter 3, verse 7 here, if you go back, if you want to write that down. The Great Tribulation that is coming, that the 2 witnesses prophesy of and set them in order. Well, you know, how do they set it in order? They actually give us the order of events. Okay, they set it in order by taking this entire book here, the book of Yahweh, that was inspired to be written, and they set it all in order, and they show us the order of events. No one else can do that. No one else has been given that ability. No one else is connected with Yahweh, who is that source of knowledge, to be able to set it all in order and show us exactly how it lays out step by step. No one else can do that. So these 2, the 2 witnesses, they prophesy and they set them in order. And they say, this is the way they're coming. Let them foretell them. Now Yahweh says, well, in Revelation 3, he shows you a group who is connected with this great tribulation, okay? And that group is the House of Yahweh in the last days, okay? The 7th era of the House of Yahweh. That's the group. And all those who are associated with this man who teaches peace here at Abel. Okay, so connected with the Great Tribulation and connected with the high priest and king over the house of Yahweh in these last days. And Hebrews 10:21 tells us, having a high priest over the house of Yahweh. Yeshua is only over this last day's work here, the work of Yahweh. So in verse 86, Revelation 3, verse 7, and to the Malach. Okay, so this is not a heavenly messenger, but it's a messenger sent with authority from heaven. Okay, he has that authority, and we're going to see that that is the messenger now over the house of Yahweh, of the congregation of the house of Yahweh in Philadelphia, or at Abel, as we learned as was brought out to us in increasing our knowledge, we know that this is referring to at Abel, which is brotherly love. And, Pastor mentions love a lot from this point. Love is, and we're going to see as 1 Yochanan 5 verse 3 tells us, love is keeping Yahweh's laws. That's what true love is. And now we know we've learned it should be ahab. And I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it here as Pastor said it here in the sermon by using the word love. But we know we've through continuing to educate ourselves and always going forward. Yahweh always brings His house forward in the knowledge. We learn that this true love is true ahab. So, continuing, of brotherly love. We're the only ones on earth, brethren, who are teaching the love of Yahweh. The love of Yahweh is teaching His commandments, that is, His laws. This is the only way that mankind will ever have peace. The peace that they're searching for but unable to find at this time is because they've rejected the only source of knowledge. They rejected the one way that could bring them this peace. That is His love displayed through His laws. You shall not murder your neighbor. That is kindness, a very kindness that comes from Yahweh. You can't beat that law. Not too long ago, I had a delivery that I had some supplies delivered out to my place, and I was giving the delivery man some instructions. I said, you'll go on 603 and you'll see the 10 Commandments sign, and you want to take a left there, which is back to the east, and you're going to head. You're going to be heading east on County Road 254, and then you're going to see the entrance to the House of Yahweh. And so I was giving him directions here. So when he came to drop off the supplies, he kind of asked me. He goes, "There's a lot of House of Yahweh people around here, right?" And I said, "Yes, there are a lot of House of Yahweh people here." And he goes, "Are they friendly?" And I said, "The House of Yahweh people are the best neighbors that you could ever have." I said, they will watch out for your stuff. They will not steal from you. They don't trespass on your property. I said I would not have any other neighbors than House of Yahweh neighbors. I said they're just the best neighbors to have. And that's because the House of Yahweh practices these laws. They practice this love and show this love, or this ahab, to one another, to our neighbors. That is a kindness, a very kindness that comes from Yahweh. You can't beat that law. You can't beat that law. If you think of the turmoil that when you have neighbors that don't keep Yahweh's laws, what it brings, and the sometimes the fear and the uncertainty and just the headache and hassle and so forth, you can't beat having neighbors there that practice Yahweh's laws. Verse 88. Well, the messenger of this congregation of love, that is, the congregation that teaches love, which remember, that is teaching Yahweh's laws, true love, that the true love is don't steal. True love is don't lust after your neighbor's property, anything that belongs to your neighbor. True love is belonging. One of the apostles said, everything is accomplished with true love of keeping the laws of Yahweh. Everything is going to be accomplished through that, through keeping these laws, not by power, not by might, but by my laws. This is the power that brings this about, and I am going to bring it about. And that's the knowledge. That knowledge there, the wisdom that Yahweh has in His set of laws, is what will bring peace to this earth eventually, after they learn their lesson right now of what the other side brings, because they have to learn that lesson. Yahweh is going to allow them to see what their choice brought about. Okay, well, let's turn the page here now and let's look at page 34. This is verse 91. Well, the Philadelphia group, the true ones who teach love here, is connected with the tribulation. Okay, so he specifies here that it is that last group there, the seventh era of the house of Yahweh. These things, okay, back to the scripture now. These things says He who is holy, or He who is sacred, He who is true, He who has the key of David. And the key of David is full authority, full strength. This is what Yahweh has given to His house in these last days. Now, we still work under the having to work while this beastly system is the governments are still there and in place, but the authority is given to do certain things, like preach the message, get it out to all the world. That's actually the command given to the house of Yahweh, to get the message out to all the world, so everyone has that opportunity. They can all hear it. And individually, they can repent as the message is going forth in these last days. You don't have to be part of this world. The world is going down. Yahweh is going up. You have an opportunity to come out of that world and go up with Yahweh. Repent and be converted, Acts 3:19. So they have this key of David, this full authority. He who opens and no man shuts, and shuts and no man opens. I know your works. So he's saying, I know the works here of this seventh messenger, this Malach here teaching in this last days group, this last days work of Yahweh. So I know this person. I know your works. I know this. I know this person who's teaching love here. I know the works that he is doing. So Yahweh is well aware. He's very connected with his house. In fact, I prophesied the work that he is doing. He's going to take this message to all the world, so all the world is going to know in advance. And that's the key, that it's said in advance. Like Yeshua said, I tell you these things in advance, so when they come to pass, you will know that there was a prophet among you. You will know that there was a man of Yahweh among you the entire time telling you these things. And that's why Yahweh says he's going to tell you these things in advance. He's not going to say, well, yeah, we knew that, and I knew that beforehand and I just didn't say anything. No, he's going to say in advance, tell us exactly how these events are going to play out, so that we will know that Yahweh is this power. There is no source of power out there except Yahweh. There is no true power that can bring salvation except Yahweh. There is no power that can foretell what your stupid actions are going to bring except Yahweh. And we know those actions now are in the form of the 7 last plagues that are coming upon mankind, because, again, they've chose the way of sin, and that sin brings about defilement. It brings about abomination. It ruins these kingdoms of microorganisms, the thousands of kingdoms of microorganisms in a person's body, but also in the earth. And so now the earth is giving it right back. They're giving it back to those that brought about this sin, because mankind is the one that sins. The earth doesn't sin. The animals don't sin. Mankind chooses to sin. The rest of the earth, the animals, the life, and so forth, they pay for it. They have to suffer because of those choices. So he says, I know your works. Now let's look over here at verse 95, right there in the middle of 95. If you haven't noticed, there's a war going on between the house of Yahweh and Satan herself. Now this isn't this isn't a physical war that's being fought, but it's a spiritual warfare. It's Satan trying to wear out the saints of Yahweh, and putting up these little obstacles and so forth, and trying to stop the work here and trying to stop it there. But Yahweh says, I'm in full control. I'm with you. I've got you, and I'm going to see you through. So that's the warfare here. That's the war that's going on between the house of Yahweh and Satan. But we have Yahweh's power. Okay, we, the house of Yahweh, have Yahweh's power. And Yahweh has all power, brethren. So don't fear. He says, don't fear, don't fear. And Pastor gives us an example here in verse 96. He says, because you have kept. All right, now he's back in Revelation chapter 3. Don't fear. I don't care if a dozen of them come to your house wearing guns and shields and bucklers. There's no power in that, brethren. They can only go as far as Yahweh will allow them to go for your benefit. Okay, so, this is where that 100% trust in Yahweh has to come in. It has to come in at that point. And if you look at the examples in the scriptures on some of the men and women that had to put their full trust in Yahweh. David, when he went up against Goliath, There's no fear in him. I mean, he said, look, Yahweh can deliver you, and he's going to. Daniel, when he was thrown in the lion's den, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when they faced the fiery furnace there, which represented the fiery judgment there that mankind is bringing about upon themselves, okay, in this last nuclear burning, they didn't fear either. They said, look, Yahweh can save us, and we hope He does. But if He doesn't, okay, well, so be it. But we're not gonna bow down to your gods. We're not gonna serve the gods when we serve Yahweh, who is this source of all power. Okay, so, and even the children of Israel, that's a great example, because they came out. Yahweh brought them out of Egypt, and here they are. They're faced with the sea on one side, the army's behind them, and, they thought that was it. It's it. And they went to complaining and mumbling, but, of course, Yahweh brought them through. He was with them there, and the plan of Yahweh was going forward. So, all of these things are for our example in the last days, because we're going to see here that, that Yahweh's going to show that power again. He's going to show that power again, but the question is for us is, are we going to believe it beforehand? Will we believe without seeing, or do we have to see before we believe? Now remember, the blessings go to those who believe without seeing. Okay, so continuing, and Yahweh can cut it off at any time He wants to. Turn your hopes to Yahweh. Where would you be if you're on the other side of this world that's going down like it is? And surely you can see it's going down. It's not getting any better. You know that. Okay, let's look at verse 100. Well, soon they will learn that Yahweh is the only power, and we're broadcasting this daily. Okay, so again, we're telling them, the last day's witness, the one who's given this power and actually given the command to foretell these future events, set them in order, He's broadcasting it. And we're broadcasting this daily. Yahweh's the only power who can show them the way to peace. Now, they've rejected that, and they know they're rejecting it, and they know that they're living a life of sin, sickness, and disease that they've learned because their minds are so confused. And, one of the now the results, the suffering from this coronavirus is it's bringing about this confusion in the mind, as we see the deliria that they're referring it to, but it's a confusion of the mind, and it's another one of Yahweh's. It's another one of the curses that comes from breaking Yahweh's laws. They haven't learned what is causing this hatred and misery in their hearts, and this seeking after pleasure, thinking this is going to bring them peace. But it never brings peace, and that has to be a miserable state, to not know what's causing the hatred and the misery in their life. But thankfully, there is the work of Yahweh that is showing them, broadcasting to the world, hey, this is the result of your misery, of the hatred that you have. You can come out of it. So the only true way to peace and joy and love is right here in this group. I know this messenger that's teaching over this congregation of love, joy, and peace. I know him. He said, I know your works. I've set before you an open door. And that open door, again, is to teach. It's to do the work. Because you have kept my word. Yes, we've kept His word. We've kept His word. That is the rest with which we will cause the weary to rest. And that is, speaking of the Sabbath day, that's one of the first things, when these nations, those who are left alive of these nations, when they flow to the house of Yahweh, one of the first things they're going to learn is keeping Yahweh's Sabbath day, so that they can have the mark of Yahweh, which right now, the mark of Yahweh or the mark of the beast, that's the deciding factor there. We see those that are suffering from these 7 last plagues. They have no rest who worship Satan day nor night. They have no Sabbath. And that's the reason that they have no rest, they have no Sabbath. Because you have kept my word, the word of my patience, I will also keep you from the hour of temptation, which will come upon all the world to test those who dwell upon this earth. Now listen to what Pastor says right here. Yes, this is a test, the final test between Satan's way and Yahweh's way. You'll find out at that time that Yahweh has the power. So you'll find out at that final test there that Yahweh has the power. But again, hopefully we all believe it before we see it take place. Okay, well, he still has the power to protect and save his people, and he's going to do so. He is going to protect you through this great mess that is coming, this last final trial. Behold, I come quickly, hold fast that which you have, that no man takes your crown. He who overcomes, I will make a pillar in the house of Yahweh, of my Father, and he will never go out of it. Now notice this is Yeshua speaking. Yahweh gave him this prophecy to give to us as high priest and king over the house of Yahweh. And I will write upon him the name of my Father and the name of the new Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my Father, newly named. Now look at verse 13. He who has an ear, let him hear. And Pastor says, what I'm saying, hear to him. Hear the message of the last day's witness that he is bringing. You can come out of this world. You can come out from that destruction. Now this work where Yisrayl foretells this work, that Yisrayl foretells the future, it's told by the witness. That's what Yahweh is showing you, and no one can do this except Yahweh himself. No one can foretell the future. No one can foretell the future except the one who Yahweh chooses. Yahweh chooses his house. This group here alone can foretell the future. Okay, in the last couple minutes that we have remaining, I'd like to turn over to the last page here. This is page 38 and verse 146. Now, Pastor, he kind of gives a little prelude into the next sermon. He says in verse 146, next week, Yahweh willing, will bring you much more of this. I'll bring you another step forward in the mark of the beast here, the beastly system, and the work of Yahweh. And if you glance over, if you have your book, right there, you're going to see that chapter 4, next week's chapter, Yahweh is the only power. Number 2, the characteristic feature of the house of Yahweh and of the quartet called the beast of the earth. So, that's a little bit of, and this is what Pastor was saying here. He said, I'll bring you another step here, showing you this beastly system and the work of Yahweh going side by side. But of course, we're going against the beastly system, and they know it. They're going against us, and we know it. I'm sorry, I think I read. But of course, we're going against the beastly system, and they know it, and they're against us, and we know it. Okay, and just one thing I'd like to conclude with here. Let's look at this, one of the characteristic features of the house of Yahweh, because we know that this needs to be our character as well. And on page 47, Pastor says, the characteristic feature of the house of Yahweh is serving one another. It's true love, true ahab. It's looking out for your brother's best interest instead of your best interest. It's even suffering for one another. Not betraying one another, but suffering for one another. Yahweh be with you and bless each and every one of you.